The view from the plane headed to Hawaii was breathtaking, but I never imagined I'd be seated next to my middle school ex-girlfriend. On top of that, she started blabbering about how worthless I've become, bringing up the past. And then, without anyone asking, she went on about how blissful her life is, bragging about marrying a wealthy man, and how much he needs her. Right then, an announcement came over the post system. Is there anyone on board who can fly a plane? It seemed like a serious problem had arisen. Looking for a pilot, not a doctor, was surprising. The passengers began to realize the gravity of the situation, murmuring, "Fly the plane. Is everything okay with this flight?" Then, as the flight attendant started making rounds through the cabin, she saw my face and said in surprise, "You must be." That's when the incident to silence my ex-girlfriend occurred. My name is Jack Smith. Ever since I was a child, I had an abnormal fascination with airplanes. I was interested in anything that could fly. The sight of birds and insects gliding freely through the sky was always beautiful and cool to me. I dreamed of flying through the sky myself one day, and I seriously believed that if I tried hard enough, I might grow wings. But unfortunately, no matter how hard I tried, I never grew wings, and I was in despair over this fact at the age of 5. That's when I saw an airplane for the first time. A mass of metal, not a living creature, was flapping through the sky. It was during a family trip with my parents. The sight of a giant bird flying through the vast sky made such an impression on me that it became a symbol of freedom. From then on, I transformed into a boy who loved airplanes more than cars or trains, memorizing the names of aircraft and airlines, and spent my days gazing at airplanes in encyclopedias. Seeing my passion, although we didn't fly weekly, my parents took me to the airport. They thought it would be better for me to see airplanes in motion. While my parents and much younger siblings never looked at airplanes with the same envy as I did, they still listened to me talk excitedly about planes with smiles and nods. Naturally, my dream for the future was to become a pilot. To fly an airplane and soar through the skies was the first dream I ever had in my life. Even now, I think it was a bit unusual for a child to have such a realistic first dream. My dad used to say, to become a pilot, you have to study hard, and I did study well, better than most kids. For the future possibility of flying planes, this seemed like nothing. I often heard teachers say, the secret to improving your studies is to have a clear vision of your future dreams. I truly believed they were right. If studying was necessary to become a pilot, then I was more than willing to devote myself to my studies. Furthermore, when my father said, "You can't become a pilot if you have cavities," I became the most diligent at brushing my teeth. I might have become skilled enough to be a dental hygienist. By the way, not all pilots are actually disqualified for having cavities. It's only some fighter pilots, due to the pressure changes, who can't have them. And if it was said that you can be a pilot without physical strength, I worked desperately hard at physical training and exercise. In any case, my childhood was more about airplanes than playing. By the time I reached middle school, I began to seriously consider the specific path to becoming a pilot. I thought that without attending a decent high school or college, I wouldn't be able to fly planes, so I continued to work hard on my studies and physical fitness. During the sensitive period of middle school, I also paid attention to my friendships. I made it a point to get along with everyone, and not make unnecessary enemies. While I tried to minimize contact with those who stressed me out, I still wanted to interact with as many people as possible, and absorb everything I could, making it part of my own flesh and blood. Embarrassing as it is to say, I was quite popular. I often received a lot of attention from girls, and honestly, I didn't mind it. When my male friends asked how I managed to be so popular, I couldn't give them a satisfying answer because I wasn't working hard at my studies and sports just to be popular. Amid all this, a girl confessed she wanted to date me. Her name was Amy White. She was a top beauty in her grade, popular among both students and teachers. Being confessed to by such a beauty, I was over the moon and had no reason to say no. I casually agreed, not knowing what I was getting myself into. This was my first time dating a girl, but I never imagined she could be this troublesome. She was extremely possessive, getting moody if I so much as talked to someone she didn't know, regardless of their gender, and I had to buy her something to cheer her up. She demanded that I delete any females from my contacts and respond to her messages instantly, showing a self-centered disregard for others. To top it off, she would say nonsensical things like, "I want you to become my ideal boyfriend," stealing away my time for studying and exercise. "Make sure you dedicate your weekends just for me. And of course, you're paying for our dates. Because making your girlfriend pay would be the worst," she demanded, an unreasonable request for a middle schooler. Gradually, I began to feel suffocated in my relationship with Amy. In the summer of my middle school years, my father passed away in an accident. Losing my father, who had been looking forward to and expecting my future more than anyone, was incredibly tough for a middle schooler like me. My mother quickly became frail and often appeared lifeless, though I wanted to cheer her up. I was too overwhelmed with my own issues to be of any help. Our family was enveloped in deep sorrow. After losing my father, whom I admired, our family had to struggle desperately just to keep living. My mother, who had been a stay-at-home mom, started working outside the home. As a result, I couldn't take care of my younger brother anymore, so I started doing it instead. Naturally, my time for studying and sports decreased, but that was unavoidable. It wasn't a burden at all if it was for my family. Of course, that wasn't the only time I had to cut back on. I also reduced the time I spent with Amy. "Why don't you contact me?" Amy would ask. When I explained the situation at home, she said, "You don't have to take care of your brother. Your mom can just do it when she gets back from work." I couldn't believe my ears. I was horrified by her ability to act so unapologetically indifferent towards a family grieving over the loss of a father, just because she wasn't getting enough attention. I broke up with Amy, saying, "I don't need a girlfriend who can't be considerate during tough times for my family." I didn't want her to destabilize my peace of mind any further. However, later at school, it turned out that Amy had made it seem like she was the one who dumped me. Moreover, she spread false rumors and badmouthed me to everyone. Seeing her true nature, I honestly didn't care much as I had my hands full just dealing with my own stuff. I decided to work instead of going to high school to ease my family's burden a bit. My mom was against it, but after some persuasion, she reluctantly gave her permission. The only things I was good at were physical activities and studying, so I decided to find a job that could make use of those skills. On graduation day, Amy somehow found out I wasn't going to high school and teased me about it. "Are you not going to high school?" Without making eye contact, I simply replied yeah, and tried to distance myself from Amy. From behind, Amy said, "Not going to high school in this day and age, you might as well be doomed to live at the bottom forever." I figured I'd probably never see her again. Thinking there was no need to get worked up over someone like that, I ignored her and left the school. Time has passed, and now, I'm in the process of checking in for a domestic flight. I was on my way to Okinawa for a personal trip. Embarrassingly, I've never been to Okinawa before, so I'm incredibly excited on the inside. Okinawa is known for its beautiful beaches and flavorful cuisine. However, it's quite far from home, so I never really found the time to go. Even thinking about sightseeing, I was worried I'd end up not leaving the hotel, struggling to decide where to go, which made me hesitant to go alone. But now, a friend of mine has opened a restaurant there, so I decided to go celebrate with them. Planning to have my friends show me around Okinawa, I've organized an extensive sightseeing tour. I can't help feeling like I might get overly excited, almost childishly so, but that's okay. I settled into my seat with ease. I actually kind of like the hustle and bustle inside the plane just before takeoff. After stowing my carry-on under the seat, I gazed out the window at the scenery. Even though we haven't taken off yet, the view from this window is unique to this spot, which gets me a bit excited. I congratulated myself on securing such a great seat. Since my seat is a bit away from the wings, the view isn't obstructed and looks great. It's perfect. With some time left before takeoff, I let my imagination run wild with the thought of the magnificent views above the clouds. The plane I was on was almost full, nearly at capacity. But the seat next to me was empty. Was it not reserved by anyone, or are they just running late? Either way, it felt a bit complicated. With a flight this crowded, having a bit more space to myself made me feel somewhat guilty towards the others. For now, I decided to look outside and get through this awkward time. Thud. There was a loud sound as someone took the seat next to me with great force. The passenger who arrived just in time was fumbling with their carry-on after sitting down, and their elbow kept hitting me. Yet, not a single sorry was uttered. Moreover, they were reeking of perfume and cosmetics. I haven't encountered someone this inconsiderate since middle school. As I reminisced about unpleasant people, I noticed a reflection of the seat next to me on the window glass. They were wearing something black over their eyes. Probably sunglasses. That's all I could make out. Wearing sunglasses on a plane seemed rather pretentious to me, though that might be a bit prejudiced. The tacky passenger next to me stopped moving after a bit and then glanced at my face. I inadvertently reacted and looked back at them. I regretted it. Even with makeup and a bit flashy, I had seen her before. She was someone I didn't want to remember. Well, if it isn't the high school dropout, how are you? As the clouds began to look ominous, I shivered at the thought of my journey taking off in such bad weather. I thought it was a pretty good analogy. When I remained silent, she took off her sunglasses and said, "Have you forgotten about me? You haven't forgotten that I dumped you, have you?" It was indeed Amy, whom I dated back in middle school. While I still found her physically attractive, her opening remark made it clear that her personality hadn't changed. "Isn't this the first time we've met since graduation? Really long time, never thought we'd meet here." Acting all high and mighty on a plane, despite being a dropout. Oh, or were you planning to board a tuna fishing boat instead? Her character, it seems, remains unchanged from those days, still on her usual form. Good to see she's doing well, at least. Amy started talking non-stop, dripping with sarcasm. She's so good at belittling people, it's like she forgets to breathe, bombarding me with insults so quickly. Truly a terrifying woman. Just to set the record straight, of course. I'm saying this in my head, but I've never heard of anyone boarding a tuna fishing boat in Okinawa. I think she could stand to broaden her knowledge a bit. I simply said, "It's a trip," and then focused on enjoying the spectacular view outside the window, wanting as little to do with her as possible. The plane started moving, indicating it was time for takeoff. This was supposed to be a flight I was looking forward to, but just one seat turned it into a dive straight into hell. Sleeping quietly over the wings would have been hundreds of times better than this. Amy seemed offended by my cold attitude. After clicking her tongue, she started saying things meant to irritate me. Like how I was the worst boyfriend. How her boyfriend in high school was way more handsome, and how dating me was a waste of her time. Apparently, after graduating high school, Amy somehow ended up marrying a wealthy man and hit the jackpot. I wasn't paying much attention, so all I remember is that she married rich. This jackpot winner, Amy, was now on her way to enjoy a luxury trip to Okinawa. She boasted about staying in a high-end hotel and enjoying the resort. A place you could never afford to stay in your entire life. That's what she said. By the way, it seems her husband is completely smitten with Amy, living a life centered around her. Well, there are all kinds of people out there. I think he's quite extraordinary, and I hope Amy treasures him forever. Because if she loses him, she probably won't be able to marry again. While I was getting fed up with Amy's self-centered talk, I tuned her out. Even at a time like this, the view from the plane was beautiful. Right after takeoff, the view below turned completely white as we emerged above the clouds. No matter how bad the weather is, if you wait a while and emerge above the clouds, a bright blue sky is always shining. The beautiful blue sky is always perched above the clouds, trying to peek through the gaps at the ground below. But when will the cloud next to me clear up? You, being at the bottom, probably find this view rare since you don't get to fly often. She still managed to mock me. Furthermore, Amy said she's flown so often that she's become bored of the view and can't bother to look at the scenery anymore. Why does she go to such lengths to lower her own worth? Having high self-esteem is good, but I couldn't understand her eagerness to diminish how others see her, not one bit. I can't believe I used to date someone like that. If I ever have children, I'll make sure to impress upon them that creating a blight on your life as a middle schooler is truly pitiful. And frankly, getting bored of the outside view just because you've flown multiple times seems misguided. The scenery shows a completely different face depending on the day and time. So you never really see the same view twice. What a waste, I think. It was while she was wholeheartedly lecturing on how wonderful a person she is. Is there a doctor on board? The announcement came. It's a line I've often heard in dramas, but it was my first time hearing it in real life. Is someone in a situation that requires medical treatment? I was worried, but there was nothing I could do. I fought to just wait quietly, but it seemed the idiot next to me fought differently. What is this situation? Well, so drama-like events really happen in real life. What's she excited about? At least, having such an attitude while someone is in need of a doctor due to serious health issues. It was confirmed that a few screws in her head were definitely loose. While I was thinking this and paying attention to the cabin, another announcement came through. Is there anyone on board who is a pilot or capable of flying the aircraft? Even I was shocked by this announcement. The cabin had been a bit restless when the call for a doctor was made, not as much as Amy's reaction, but definitely noticeable. However, when they called for a pilot, the atmosphere truly became tumultuous. Is the plane okay? And does the pilot need a doctor? Were among the questions passengers were asking as they called for the flight attendants. It's understandable. After the call for a doctor, now a pilot, surely something must have happened to the pilot. Even Amy's face went pale, and she started to panic. What, is this plane going to crash? This woman is saying unnecessary things again. In this situation, mentioning a crash could potentially cause a panic in the cabin. This is why I dislike people who can't see beyond themselves. Understandably, a flight attendant quickly approached Amy after she loudly mentioned a crash. Ma'am, please, nothing like that will happen. Could you please return to your seat? Amy was complaining to the flight attendant, but the attendant skillfully urged her back to her seat. Then, the flight attendant looked at me. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Smith?" I made eye contact with her and asked, "Oh, is it that serious? Thank goodness you're here. I'm really sorry to ask, but could you please assist us?" It seemed the situation was indeed serious. Thinking that Amy's concerns might not be entirely unfounded, I nodded and stood up from my seat. "What are you doing? If you're going to be in the way, it's better you just sit here and tremble miserably," she said. I almost retorted with "the miserable one is you," but managed to hold it back. When the flight attendant asked if she was with me, I denied it with all my might. "She's just an old acquaintance, happened to be seated next to me by chance, a person by the roadside, if you will. She has nothing to do with me," I explained. I wanted to head to the cockpit right away, but Amy wouldn't let go of my arm. "Where do you think you're going in this situation?" I asked her to let go, but Amy showed no signs of releasing me. Just as I was wondering what to do, a flight attendant came over and said, "I'm sorry, folks, but Smith here is actually our pilot. And there's an emergency situation he needs to attend to, so he will be stepping away." With that polite yet firm declaration, she managed to pull Amy's hand away. "You're a pilot?" Amy asked, eyes wide in surprise. I simply replied with a yes, and headed for the cockpit. The area around the cockpit was crowded with flight attendants, all in a commotion. I found out that both the captain and the co-pilot were showing symptoms of gastroenteritis. By chance, there was a doctor on board this flight who had examined them both. However, their condition wasn't improving at all. In fact, their symptoms were getting worse. Therefore, it was becoming difficult to pilot the aircraft, which led to an urgent announcement for a pilot. Acute gastroenteritis can occur suddenly without warning, so it couldn't have been prevented. Still, the odds of both of them getting gastroenteritis at the same time seem incredibly low. Almost like a miracle, or perhaps the worst luck. Around the cockpit, I saw many familiar faces, and upon seeing me, they exclaimed, "Wow, to think Smith was on board too, what luck." Both pilots down with gastroenteritis, and by chance, there's a doctor and even a pilot among the passengers. I felt like I had used up all my luck in life to hit these astronomical odds. Almost to the point of thinking I'd be unlucky for the rest of my life. According to the doctor, the co-pilot's symptoms were milder than the captain's, and he was barely able to hold a conversation. Yet, it seemed pretty severe as sweat beaded on his forehead. Somehow, I managed to convince them to contact the control tower, and then I took my seat in the cockpit. No matter when, the tension and exhilaration are hard to control. Carrying passengers added an incredible amount of pressure on me. Thinking of being responsible for the lives of the passengers made me feel like throwing up and shaking. Just like when I was a newbie pilot. But at the same time, there was a view only pilots could see, unfolding before my eyes. It's a fantastic view that you can't experience from the passenger seats. The hot sunlight from the sun illuminates the surroundings, even turning the thick clouds below into a beautiful backdrop. That ultimate exhilaration, felt only by pilots, also filled my heart as I piloted the plane. I wonder if my brain is flooding with strange hormones, because sitting here is an absolute joy. Well, at least for me. I once shared this feeling, only to be bluntly called weird by a flight attendant. I feel sorry for Amy. To think she's bored without ever seeing such views. The plane safely landed in Hawaii, and the lives of the passengers and crew were protected. After that, the captain and the co-pilot were immediately taken to the hospital. The doctor who had been caring for them said, "We were lucky to have you on board." If it were just me, everyone would have ended up in the hospital, but those two are enough," as he stroked his beard. What an irreverent thing for a doctor to say. But I guess, in his own way, he was trying to show appreciation for me. Still, even though we landed safely, from the company's perspective, it was a major incident. Thus, even after arriving in Hawaii, it took time with paperwork and reports, and I wasn't free until after the sun had set. As originally planned, I rushed to meet a friend who had just opened a new store. Of course, I drove safely to get there. The store was already bustling with many customers. Upon seeing me, my friend and the owner, Alex, broke into a wide smile and slapped my back, saying, "Glad you could make it. You've had quite the day, haven't you? I heard you ended up piloting a passenger plane all of a sudden." Where did he get that information from? I hadn't planned on bragging. So I thought there was no need to talk about it, but if he already knew, I couldn't very well not discuss it. The slap from the muscular Alex left my back tingling. And as I rubbed the sore spot, I sat down and explained everything that had happened today. "Man, that's an incredible stroke of luck, but can you believe it's already been 5 years since you left the service? Time flies." Alex laughed. Indeed, realizing it has been 5 years makes me lament how swiftly time passes. "Are you a friend of the master?" I heard a gentle voice from behind me. Turning around, I saw a refined gentleman, smiling and addressing me. Next to him was a lady with less grace. "Excuse me," Amy was standing there. Alex returned the smile to the gentleman. "It appears he's a regular here." This fellow was my comrade during our time in the service. He was excellent, stationed at the Pensacola base, part of the 4th Air Group, 11th Squadron. He explained thoroughly. Though I doubted anyone would understand such specifics. "Could it be the Blue Angels?" the gentleman exclaimed, eyes shining. He always wanted to be a pilot back in the day. But due to an accident when he was young that nearly cost him his sight in his right eye, he had no choice but to give it up, tearfully. I felt the same way. To remember the names of planes, airlines, and even the branches of the military to such an extent, he must be a real aviation enthusiast. It had been a while since I met someone who loved planes that much, so I found myself excitedly chatting with him. I was here to celebrate Alex's occasion, yet I ended up deep in conversation with the gentleman, leaving Alex aside. The gentleman was particularly fascinated with the Blue Angels, speaking loudly about how truly magnificent their air shows are. The one who interrupted our passionate discussion was none other than Amy. She addressed him with a genteel voice. The gentleman scratched his head and said, "Oh, sorry about that, I got a bit carried away." I thought there was no need for him to apologize. But it seemed they were a couple, so I decided not to say anything unnecessary and kept my mouth shut. When it came up in conversation that Amy was my classmate from middle school, the gentleman's eyes lit up again. He asked me various questions. When he asked, "Where are you now?" I told him I was working as a pilot in the civilian sector. The gentleman looked puzzled by my response. "Well, that figures. Alex and I were comrades during our time in the service. And if you love planes, naturally, you'd want to fly something like a fighter jet for the military. I actually had a car accident in the past and became unable to fly fighter jets. Still loving the sky, I switched to civilian aviation." I explained the situation. 5 years ago, on a rainy day, while crossing at an intersection, a car ran the red light and hit me. It was a case of the driver being distracted. We settled for compensation. So it's not like I hold a grudge now, but that accident broke my left leg and required a lengthy rehabilitation. As a result, I didn't meet the flight hours required and was disqualified from being a pilot. I also developed after effects from the accident, making it impossible to fly fighter jets, which are more physically demanding than commercial planes. Indeed, I was in despair at that time. It was a dream since my childhood, and it was the dream my late father had supported so much. But this too was a product of my father's teachings. The past is the past, there's no point in dwelling on it, so do the greatest thing you can do now, he would often say to me. If you wallow in regret, even the things you can still achieve become impossible. When the accident made it impossible for me to fly fighter jets, the higher-ups suggested I move to a department focused on clerical work. But flying was something I could never give up on, so I resigned from the military and transferred to civilian life. Becoming a civilian pilot was harder than I imagined, and there were many obstacles, that's true. But I never gave up. My place is in that vast sky. There was no other way. After I finished sharing, Amy's husband, now known as Kenny, had tears in his eyes, seemingly moved. I've never met someone as wonderful as you. Your never give up spirit is truly amazing. If you don't mind someone like me, could we possibly keep in touch, he said, pulling out his smartphone. After such a statement, there was no way I could refuse. And, to be honest, I was flattered by the praise. We continued to passionately discuss planes. During this time, Amy looked down, shrinking in size. Amy's husband introduced himself as Kenny. He owned several real estate properties in resort areas around Japan, including Okinawa, and was a well-known wealthy individual in that world. It seems Amy wasn't lying when she told me on the plane that she had indeed married into wealth. I was honestly skeptical, though. Kenny had been frequently in touch since we met in Okinawa, and was straightforward in character. He was the epitome of integrity, not tolerating any dishonesty, and seemed to be trusted by many. It's no wonder one might think, was he drugged to choose Amy as his partner? At one point, I received a message from Amy on my smartphone. Do not ever tell my husband that we used to date. Please don't mess with my happiness, it read. I really don't want to have anything to do with Amy if I can help it. But thinking of Kenny, I wonder if it might be better to tell him. It's a troubling thought. However, Amy must be somewhat aware that her actions towards me back then were dishonest. I doubt her character has improved since the airplane incident. And she probably went to great lengths to marry a wealthy man by putting on an act. If she worked that hard for it, I won't be the one to ruin it for her. Though, it is quite comical. But honestly, I believe Amy's true nature will eventually reveal itself to Kenny, even if I don't say anything. However, I hope they can enjoy their happiness for as long as it lasts, before that happens. I replied to Amy with a single word, understood. After that, there was no reply from her. Amy will probably live her life hiding her past from her husband. Or rather, she might not have any other way to live now. Living in fear of when her past actions or the people she harassed might be exposed. That's the responsibility and the sin for what she did in the past. The past never disappears. Some time had passed since the day I went on a trip to Okinawa. By chance, I ran into Kenny at the airport. However, the Kenny I saw there had lost a lot of weight and seemed visibly worn out. When I approached him and asked, he revealed that he had divorced his wife, Amy. A while after the incident in Okinawa, a friend of Amy's had visited their house. Kenny was home due to work, and thinking not to disturb the two, was working on his computer in the room next to the guest room. The visiting friend, a middle school acquaintance, was speaking loudly enough for their conversation to be unavoidably overheard. Amid their vulgar laughter, names of presumably middle school classmates were mentioned, mocked with ugly nicknames. My name was also among those mentioned. Kenny exploded in anger at Amy and her friends, laughing that a man is best if he's wealthy. He stormed from his study to the guest room, shouting, "Get out right now!" He threw Amy and her friend out of the house, not allowing them back in that day. Afterward, it came to light that Amy had been dipping into the savings without permission and squandering money. Amy retorted, "It's your fault for being so stingy despite being rich." Initially, Kenny had hoped for a change of heart so they could start over. But Amy's complaints like, "I never imagined you'd be so tight with money. And it's embarrassing not to have designer items," left him unfazed. Honestly, I wasn't too surprised to hear that. The more Amy berated Kenny, the more his heart drifted away from her. Fed up, Kenny initiated the divorce. And then, amusingly enough, her attitude changed dramatically. She started saying things like, "I don't want to separate, it was just a slip of the tongue." Did she really think it wouldn't come to divorce after all this? It seemed her mind was only ever really on herself. When he got too fed up and mentioned getting a lawyer and taking it to court, Amy reluctantly signed the divorce papers. There was a huge dispute over the division of assets, but Kenny said that it finally all came to an end recently. Kenny was disheartened. "I thought she was a wonderful woman, but I never expected her true nature to be like that." I agreed with him wholeheartedly. It's not about looks. Sure, as a kid, it's clear that people with good looks get more attention. But as adults, it really comes down to being with someone whose personality matches yours. Otherwise, it becomes a burden to be together. After divorcing Kenny, Amy went back to her hometown to live with her parents, having been a stay-at-home wife. She found it hard to get a job, and with the demand to repay the money she squandered, she's living modestly. I believe that if you do wrong, it comes back to you. She's paying for not just how she treated Kenny. No, it's not just him. I think she's facing the consequences for a lifetime of belittling others. After hearing all this from Kenny at the airport, I parted ways with him. Leaving the airport, I looked up at the sky. Unfortunately, it was cloudy. But I know. Above the dreary clouds, there's an endlessly clear blue sky. I think seeing the view from the cockpit is a pilot's privilege. If Amy could come to appreciate such views, maybe then she could truly become human. Continuing as a pilot comes with its trials. Yet, feeling that I can persevere for the sake of those views makes it all seem possible. Today, I am reminded that to see beautiful views and to ensure the safety of my passengers, I must continue to strive.